The ancient village of Elmwood, a corner forgotten by time. Far from the hustle and bustle of the city, it seems to be covered by a veil of mystery. Legends have been passed down from one generation to the next, and the village's history is full of evil shadows. In the center of the village, there is an area known locally as the Land of Ghosts and Shadows. This land has never been cultivated, never sees the light of day, and is always shrouded in gray clouds. Villagers told stories about mysterious forces that shrouded the land, and at night, strange noises and sometimes low whispers could be heard. People are so afraid to go near the Land of Ghosts and Shadows that they even take a detour during the day. The grass and trees there are withered, and the ground is covered with cracks, as if there is some unknown force stirring underground. Elderly villagers say that a long time ago, this place used to be a place of worship for the gods. But as time went on, the blessings of the gods were replaced with a dark curse. Legends also tell of uncanny occurrences, such as ghostly apparitions claimed to have been seen in the woods near the Land of Ghostly Shadows, and others say they have heard weeping at night, as if forgotten souls were in mourning. Although the inhabitants of this village dare not face these legends squarely, there is no denying that the presence of the haunted lands affects the entire atmosphere of Elmwood. Whenever night fell, the villagers would close their doors and windows tightly, not daring to go out. The legends became a part of the village, a constant reminder that some unexplainable horror awaited there. Life in the old countryside of Elmwood seems to remain serene under a shroud of legends. Yet one unbelievable disappearance after another continues to occur, pushing the quiet village into the abyss. Recently, a young girl suddenly disappeared one rainy night. Her name was Amy, and she was a lively and lovely child in the village. But on that terrible night, it was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. Her mother found her room empty, with only a loose doll left on her bed, as if a reminder of a terrible tragedy. The villagers began to talk around this mysterious disappearance. This was the third disappearance in the past few months, and each one sent people into a panic. Rumors spread quickly, with some saying that the missing children had been sucked into the Land of Ghosts and Shadows, while others speculated that some kind of horrible monster was hiding in the woods near the village. The police department's investigation never made any progress. They searched every corner of the village and even sent people deep into the Land of Ghosts and Shadows, but they couldn't find any clues. Every search party felt deeply uneasy in that eerie land, as if the air around them was filled with an ominous atmosphere. The families of the missing children fell into deep despair. Villagers began to barricade their homes for fear that evil forces would continue to attack their families. The laughter of the children disappeared and was replaced by the fear that permeated the village. The atmosphere in Elmwood became heavier and heavier, and people's eyes were filled with anxiety. They begin to wonder if the village's ancient legends have something to do with these disappearances. As more children disappeared, the people felt the time approaching when they had to unravel the mystery, or the entire village would be engulfed in horror. On a stormy night, the main character, Aidan, walks hurriedly through the streets of Elmwood. He is a young journalist who has heard rumors about missing children and has decided to come and investigate himself. But the streets of the village seem empty and the windows are closed, as if the whole village is enveloped in a dreary atmosphere. He knocked on the door of a house, and an elderly lady answered the door with a troubled look in her eyes. The protagonist asks her about the missing children, and tears begin to well up in the lady's eyes. She tells Aidan that her granddaughter is one of the children who has recently gone missing, and that everyone else in the village is also fearful. The protagonist is deeply impressed by the unusual atmosphere in this village, and he decides to talk to more villagers to find out more. They all avoid talking about the missing child, as if talking about the subject would bring bad omens. However, in a tavern, he meets a young man who is willing to talk. The young man's name is Ellie, and she was a friend of one of the missing children. She tells the hero about the last time he saw the missing child, describing the weather, the child's expression, and a strange whisper on a cloudy wind. After listening to Ellie's account, the hero began to wonder if the missing children were related to the land of ghosts. He decides to go to that place during the daytime of the next day to explore if he can find some clues. As night falls, he returns to the cottage he rented. But when he closes his eyes, his mind fills with scenes from the children's disappearance, as if their apparitions were right in front of his eyes. He decides to challenge his fears, and the following morning he begins his journey to the land of ghosts and shadows. The roads grew more and more desolate. The trees faded, and the atmosphere grew more and more eerie. When he finally stood in that forgotten land, a strange power seemed to surround him, and he felt himself drawn to the whispering voices. He found some strange marks on the ground, as if something had happened here. But as he looked closer, a chill went through his body, and he felt something watching him. He turned his head, but saw nothing but the desolate land and the bleak sound of the wind. As the sun set, he returned to the hut, but his mind could not shake what he had just experienced. His sleep was disturbed by nightmares, and the faces of the children came back again and again in his dreams, as if calling him to come and unravel this horrible mystery. Thick clouds of gloom cover Elmwood, and the investigations of the main character, Adon, have sparked an even greater curiosity in him. On that stormy night, he decided to set foot in the haunted lands once more in an attempt to unravel the veil of this place of mystery. He hid in the darkness, his eyes locked on the land of ghosts and shadows. An eerie green light rose from the ground, and he couldn't help but hold his breath. A group of black-robed men walked slowly towards the center, surrounding an ancient altar. The faces of these men were hidden by darkness and hats, as if they were beings who had stepped out of a ghostly dream world. It gradually dawns on the protagonist that this is a mystical ritual. The black-robed men gathered together and whispered ancient incantations, their voices unusually eerie in the night. A roaring fire was lit on the altar, casting dancing shadows. At the height of the ritual, a black-robed figure emerged from the mass, holding a bowl filled with an unknown substance. He gently sprinkled the substance on the altar and then held out his hand as if performing some mystical ritual. The darkness around them seemed to begin to converge, forming a vague outline around the altar. Suddenly, a cold wind hit him, and the protagonist felt a shiver run through his heart. In his vision, the altar seemed to become distorted, as if reality and illusion were intertwined. Visions began to appear before his eyes, a horrific picture in which the missing children wailed. The protagonist could not help but feel that he was caught up in some evil force. His breathing became labored, but he knew he had to hold on and reveal the truth of it all. In the darkness of the night, he fought against this evil influence with all his might, trying to stay awake. The ritual of the black-robed men gradually came to an end, and one by one they left the haunted land as if nothing had happened. The protagonist stayed where he was, feeling the residual energy. He knew he was getting closer to the truth, but it was far from being revealed. Returning to the hut, he began to organize the information he had gathered, and he decided to continue his investigation deeper and deeper. No matter how much fear stood in the way before him, the protagonist Adon's experiences in the land of ghosts and shadows have left him deep in nightmares. Every night, he is haunted by the faces of missing children, as if they are asking for his help. His sleep becomes erratic, and he feels exhausted during the day. In his dreams, the children seem to call out to him, their eyes filled with despair and fear. The protagonist sensed a powerful force behind this manipulating everything, and he began to wonder if it was all related to the land of ghosts and shadows and the mysterious rituals of those black-robed men. During the day, he continues to talk to the villagers, trying to find clues. He meets an old man who tells the protagonist more about the legend of the land of ghosts and shadows. It is said that long ago, the place was used to worship dark forces, and that an evil cult used to perform terrible rituals there. The protagonist begins to realize that there may be an ancient curse hidden behind all of this. He decides to continue his investigation deeper, searching for clues related to the cult, the missing children, and the place of ghosts and shadows. He begins to consult the historical records of the village, looking for information related to that era. However, with each step he felt heavier and heavier, as if some unknown force was trying to stop his investigation. He began to feel that his mind was becoming confused, and that reality was intertwined with hallucinations. He searched every corner of the village for clues, but seemed to be caught in a nightmare from which there was no escape. One stormy night, he once again traveled to the land of ghosts and shadows in an attempt to find more clues. This time, he feels an unusual energy that seems to be trying to suck him underground. Visions begin to appear all around him, the faces of children appearing in the darkness, their cries echoing in his ears. The protagonist struggled to stay awake, knowing he had to resist this evil force. His consciousness begins to blur, but he is convinced that only by uncovering the truth will he be able to save the missing children and the entire village. Struggling to remain conscious in the darkness of the night, he fights the evil visions and is willing to do whatever it takes to reveal this ancient mystery. The horror of Elmwood grows stronger, while the main character, Aidan, is determined to uncover the truth about this ancient mystery. No longer worried about his nightmares, he knows he must confront the secrets buried deep in the darkness in order to free the missing children. He began to focus on the mysterious rituals of the black-robed men, trying to find out more about them. By looking through historical records, he finally found some clues. It turned out that many years ago, this village was once a gathering place for a cult that worshipped an ancient evil god known as the Dark Lord. According to the records, the followers of that cult used to perform demonic rituals in the land of ghosts and shadows in exchange for the power of the Dark Lord. These rituals involved sacrifices and offerings, and the missing child may have fallen victim to their dark rites. The protagonist understands that to solve this mystery, he must go deeper into the land of ghosts and shadows to find more evidence. However, he also knows that it is fraught with danger, and that he may be plunged deeper into a nightmare. On a gloomy night, he once again set foot in the land of ghosts and shadows. The atmosphere there was unusually eerie, as if there was an invisible force tempting him. He gradually sensed an evil force that seemed to be trying to bind his will. In that place, shrouded in shadows, he found an ancient stone monument that was inscribed with ancient runes. As his eyes slid over the runes, a powerful force came over him, and he felt a connection in his mind, as if he could hear the cries of the past. In that moment, he suddenly understood everything. The village's horrific secrets were left behind by that ancient cult who, through the power of the Dark Lord, imprisoned the souls of children in the land of ghosts and shadows in exchange for eternal power. The master felt his insides warring, and he knew he had to destroy that ancient altar and undo this ancient curse. He picked up a nearby stone and hurled it at the altar with all his might. The moment the stone struck the altar, a powerful light erupted, and the power of the Dark Lord began to disintegrate. The Lord felt a powerful energy emanate from the altar, as if the bonds of evil had been broken. With a loud bang, the land of ghosts and shadows began to crumble, as if a forbidden evil had been released. The protagonist was caught in the shockwave and lost consciousness. When he awoke again, he found himself back in the hut. The atmosphere of the village has regained its calm, as if the nightmare has ended. The missing children had also reappeared, their faces full of gratitude. The hero understood that he had succeeded in freeing the missing children and destroying that ancient curse. Although he had paid a great price, he knew that it was worth it. He will continue to move forward, using his reporter's pen and his courage to guard this village, to guard those innocent children, so that the shadow of terror will never again hang over this land. The protagonist, Aeon, has put great effort into rescuing the missing children and uncovering the ancient curse. However, he realizes that this horrible mystery is not yet completely over, and he must face the ultimate challenge of a desperate showdown with the black-robed men. He has gathered enough evidence to prove that the black-robed men are closely linked to the missing children and the ancient cult. He knows that to put an end to it all, he must travel to the lair of the black-robed men, reveal the power of the Dark Lord, and destroy it. On a dark and windy night, he arrives at the gathering place of the Black Cloaks. There was an abandoned church, its abandoned bell tower chiming low in the wind. The protagonist sensed an ominous atmosphere pervading the place, as if the forces of darkness were gathering in the place. He quietly enters the church and finds the black-robed men performing an even more ancient and frightening ritual. An ancient evil book lay on the altar while the black-robed men formed a circle and whispered incantations. Their eyes were filled with frenzy and malice, as if they had been taken over by the power of the Dark Lord. The Lord no longer hesitated. He stepped forward, his voice loudly announcing his presence. The heads of the black-robed people turned to him, their eyes filled with anger and surprise. In his hand, he held a dagger engraved with ancient runes, a weapon he had prepared to fight the forces of darkness. The black-robed men began to come at him, and the protagonist fought them fiercely. Their spells and dark magic made the battle exceptionally difficult. Yet the hero was determined not to be deterred. He wielded his dagger and tried to repel the black-robed men and stop their ritual. In the midst of the vicious fight, he suddenly felt himself bound by a powerful force. His consciousness began to blur, as if some dark energy was trying to erode his mind. However, he resisted the force and gathered his will. Just as the power of darkness almost overwhelmed him, he suddenly remembered the missing children and their cries. This unwavering conviction caused him to regain his strength, and he broke free of the darkness and fought off the last of the black-robed men with his dagger. As the last of the black-robed men fell, the church fell into a deathly silence. The protagonist knew that he had succeeded in stopping the Dark Lord's power, rescuing the missing children, and destroying the ancient cult once and for all. He felt exhausted, but a sense of fulfillment filled his heart. He walked out of the church and saw the first rays of the morning sun as a new day began. The atmosphere of the village seemed to become fresh, and the laughter of the missing children once again echoed in the air. The protagonist understands that, despite the horrors of his battles and the challenges of despair, he has unraveled this ancient mystery with courage and determination, bringing hope and salvation. He knows that the village will never again be shrouded by the shadow of darkness, and the story of his courage will be told. After the main character, Aeon, succeeds in stopping the power of the Dark Lord and rescuing the missing children, peace begins to gradually return to the village. However, he understands that the horrific battle is not completely over, but has left an eternal price. As time passed, Aeon began to feel the weakness of his body. His memories began to blur, and nightmares appeared in his dreams from time to time. His body gradually wasted away, and his eyes were filled with exhaustion. He began to delve into the power of the Dark Lord, trying to understand the nature of that ancient demonic force. He realized that although he had succeeded in stopping the cult's rituals, he had unknowingly incorporated a portion of that power into his body as he fought against the dark force. He realized that he had to pay some price in order to save the village and the children. The power of the darkness began to gradually erode his heart. and he felt his will becoming weak, as if the shadow of the Dark Lord was creeping into his soul. His pain deepened as the faces of the missing children surfaced in his mind, and the cries of the children seemed to echo in his ears. He tries to fight these visions, but the influence of the darkness grows stronger and stronger, and he feels that he is losing himself. The people of the village begin to notice a change in him, and they realize that he has paid a great price for them. They are grateful for his courage and sacrifice, but they also fear for his safety. The villagers rallied together and tried to help him overcome the forces of darkness. On a cold winter night, the villagers held a ceremony to try to dispel the dark influences within the protagonist. But they formed a circle and held hands, passing on hope and strength. Iodine stands among them, feeling their support and love. As the ceremony proceeded, Adadon felt a warm energy penetrate his body, and his consciousness began to clear. He realized that he was no longer a lone warrior. He had the support of this village, and he had the hope of those children. As the ceremony came to an end, he felt his inner peace grow, and the effects of the darkness diminish. However, he knew that he had forever become connected to that ancient demonic power, and that was the price he had paid to save his village. In the days when peace is restored to the village, the protagonist, Adadon, continues to reside there, guarding the land with his pen and his courage. He knows that while his body may be fading, his will never be defeated. The village was finally free from the shadow of darkness, and the missing children regained their happy smiles. The story of the protagonist became legendary, and his courage and sacrifice were remembered. Though he paid the price of eternity, he used his power to light up hope in the darkness and bring the village back to life.